Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Wes Honkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field, back from Brazil, where the Packers unfortunately fell to the Philadelphia Eagles 34-29. And Wes, whether you're talking about the missed opportunities in that game, the injury to Jordan Love, which we'll get into more of the details of that here in a minute, it was just a trip full of regrets for the Green Bay Packers, quite frankly, the way things ended.
Yeah, it was weird, Mike, because I left the stadium. I mean, you lost and it sucks. But I remember being so much more demoralized by what happened in London against the Giants than in this game against the Eagles. And two things to that. One, I think the Eagles are a pretty good team.
Yeah, I think they are. I think they are too.
And it was a knockdown, slug-out fight. I think I counted 7 lead changes in this thing. It was balanced throughout. It's just that I think in the final round there, the fourth quarter, the Eagles threw a couple more punches and were able to win this thing. It's regrettable from the standpoint that the Green Bay Packers had multiple chances to take control of this game, and they just were not able to do it.
Yep.
When you get 3 takeaways the way they did, 2 of them right off the bat, but you only get 6 points, when you seem like every single time there was an opportunity to really separate yourself in this matchup, the Packers fell short. And then certainly the last 15 seconds of the game, Jordan Love goes down with the knee injury, and I just remember sitting there, beautiful stadium, beautiful night, but I just remember sitting there in my chair thinking man, it really happened again. Just like with, Aaron and the thumb, you hope it doesn't linger the way it did with Aaron, but right at the very end, you got through that game relatively healthy as a team, and then unfortunately Jordan goes out.
Yeah, well, what we have learned to this point with regard to Jordan Love's knee injury, the Packers are not putting him on an injured reserve, which is good news. And hearing Matt LaFleur talk about the situation on Monday, he didn't use the phrase week to week. But that's sort of what I took out of it, that, Matt LaFleur was not going to put a timeline on this thing. And he didn't even actually rule Jordan Love out for this Sunday against the Colts. But, I took that not as much about what maybe this weekend, what might or might not happen this weekend, but that there seems to be a lot of internal optimism that Jordan Love's injury is not going to keep him out too awfully long. Now, exactly what that's going to mean, we'll have to wait and see. But that was at least good news, because we've seen, in past years when Aaron Rodgers has broken collarbones and the broken thumb and things like that. Now, obviously, Rodgers kept playing through the broken thumb, but it was something that definitely affected the Packers season in 2022 for quite some time. Hopefully, Jordan Love can be back on the field sooner than later. The Packers want to make sure that he's going to be all the way back and he can protect himself and he's not at risk of any greater injury to that knee. But in the meantime, the Packers are going to prepare Malik Willis, who just got here a couple of weeks ago. They're going to prepare him to start against the Indianapolis Colts in place of Jordan Love. And it's kind of how this league goes sometimes, right? You never know what is going to happen week to week in this league, and suddenly the Packers season in week 2, what we're looking at right in front of us, just looks completely different than maybe what we expected.
And my big line, not that I'm some fancy writer, but was every NFL season has twists and turns, and it's how you deal with it. Last year, it was Aaron Jones and the hamstring. That was a storyline for Green Bay the entire season. Actually, as it turned out, he ended up aggravating again at the end of the year in San Francisco. With it, Jordan Love, with just being the sprain or whatever have you, this is something that obviously Matt LaFleur said they're not going to put him in a position where he can't protect himself. They're not going to put him in a position where they're mortgaging their future for the short term, especially in week 2. You don't want to go down that road. For Malik Willis, I think this is a golden opportunity if he is ultimately the guy that steps out there on the field and leads the Packers into the home opener against the Indianapolis Colts, because for so long, he was looking for that opportunity and that chance to show how he's grown since just getting his feet wet and being thrown into the fire as a rookie in 2022. Barely played last season, and now here he is. He comes to Green Bay, has off of strong training camp, strong preseason, but they were going with Will Levis, and they wanted Mason Rudolph as their backup in Tennessee, so then Willis was available. Here he is now in this offense, and with Matt LaFleur, Tom Clements, there is going to be an encyclopedia thrown at him this week, I would imagine. But ultimately, it's on the coaches to find a digestible game plan that he can function with, he can administer, and the Green Bay Packers very much are still expecting to win this game on Sunday.
I think that's really the key thing, and Matt LaFleur emphasized that on Monday, that, yes, Malik Willis has only been here for a couple of weeks, and he can't really put a percentage on how much of the playbook he actually knows or how much of the playbook he will know by the time Sunday's kickoff rolls around, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is that Malik Willis needs to understand 100% of the game plan that the Packers are going to take into this game. No, he won't have that encyclopedic knowledge of the offensive system that an Aaron Rodgers or a Jordan Love would have with the experience that they bring with Matt LaFleur and with this system to the table. But that's not what matters. It's about the game plan that's going to be taken into that game on Sunday. And when you look at this, you look at what Malik Willis will have at his disposal. Yes, there were a lot of regrets from the Eagles game with regard to the missed chances in the red zone, the goal to go after the turnovers, all that kind of stuff, the penalties. There's a lot for the Packers to clean up there on the offensive side of the ball in particular. But a couple of things. One, we saw the massive explosive playability of Jayden Reed. He ends up scoring 2 touchdowns in this game, 1 rushing, 1 receiving, the 33-yard end around for a touchdown, and then the 70-yard catch and run for a touchdown. So that is certainly something for the Packers to hang their hat on. And aside from the end around for a touchdown, the Packers really got their running game going. It was a tough slog early. They had to make some adjustments against the Eagles. But after Josh Jacobs was held to just 4 yards on his first 6 carries against the Eagles, after that, Wes, Emmanuel Wilson and Josh Jacobs combined for 126 yards on 14 carries. That was 9 yards per carry, basically from the second quarter on against the Eagles. That kind of running game, if the Packers can bring that kind of running game into the home opener against the Colts with Malik Willis at quarterback, that's going to go a long way for that young man trying to get a victory here in Jordan Love's place.
And that was probably, when you get back to what this game played out, the most maddening part of it is if you would have told me on Friday morning as you and I are getting ready to go to this game that the Packers are going to run the ball 21 times for 163 yards and a touchdown, 3 takeaways, I would say, oh, well, how many touchdowns do they win by?
Right.
It's just because it's like those are big-time numbers and big-time explosive plays. And the thing that you can take some solace in now going into this is it seemed like they were functioning better as a unit in the second half. And it's not just, okay, well, Philly was wearing down. No, guys were just fulfilling their assignments. And that's always the nice thing about being able to talk to Matt LaFleur on a Monday and just being able to get away from the game a little bit, see the film, take the emotions out of it. In the locker room afterwards, as Matt Steinman pointed out in his question to Matt, a lot of guys were talking about the scheme change they made and things that they did differently in the second half. And as LaFleur pointed out on Monday, it wasn't so much that. It was just guys blocking better, being able to take out linebackers at the second level rather than them shooting gaps and being able to, stall the running backs. And to be really honest with you, I thought one of the biggest plays, and I can't remember exactly how many yards it went for, but there was one of those moments right there early in the third quarter, I believe it was, where Josh Jacobs was sort of dead to rights in the hole, and he made a guy miss. And then once they started being able to get some of those 10, 11-yard plays, the ball started bouncing a little bit more. Emmanuel Wilson, dude, I've said it time and time again, this guy can just run the football. And I had asked Josh Jacobs about him 2 weeks ago, and he said, if you watch him on film, he doesn't look like he's that fast, but that guy can move.
Yeah.
Like when he's on the field and you're playing the game of football, like he is a very difficult guy to bring to the ground with his size and his speed. And they don't have A.J. Dillon, but I'll tell you what, man, especially with Marshawn Lloyd still working his way back from this hamstring, Emmanuel Wilson is a really good complimentary back. And Mike, before I throw this back to you, I will just say one last time. 2013, the Packers lost Aaron Rodgers to the collarbone for the first time. Matt Flynn was a godsend, coming in from Buffalo after he got cut and was able to manage the offense for the next month to be able to get the Packers in a playoff position. But the reason why the Packers were still alive when Aaron Rodgers came back in Chicago was because of how well Eddie Lacy ran the football and how well that offensive line blocked for him. However long Jordan Love is gone, 0 games, 1 game, 4 games, who knows?
Yeah.
that running game is going to be very important for Green Bay now moving forward and being able to have a second half like they did in Brazil.
Yeah, and I hope people realize as well, and I put together my weekly What You Might Have Missed segment looking at the film specifically about the running game, and I have the clips in there of what the Eagles were doing on those early runs, the way Nakobe Dean, Zach Bond, the linebackers were shooting gaps. They weren't scraping, they weren't playing traditional run defense. They were shooting gaps and playing really aggressively, and it was throwing off the timing of the Packers blocking where you start with a double team or a combo block and then a guy shifts off to go pick off the linebacker. My point is, this is not as simple as saying, oh, look at, as soon as Emmanuel Wilson went in the game, the Packers started to run the ball better, so why isn't it just give the ball to Wilson instead of Jacobs? Well, take a look at the film, because when Wilson did first go into the game, the Packers also did change what they were doing, where they instead of just doing strictly the zone scheme runs, they were doing some gap scheme runs. They were pulling Sean Ryan from right guard. They were pulling Tucker Kraft from the right side at tight end to come over and make blocks. So they were changing up their blocking scheme. That got the Eagles on their heels a little bit to say, like, okay, we can't just charge straight up the field against this running game. So then when the Packers went back to the zone scheme later in the game, and again, these clips are in the What You Might Have Missed, then you saw the Packers' timing was a little bit better. They were kind of in some ways ignoring the combo blocks, getting to the guys on the second level right away so that they couldn't shoot those gaps. And the running game just continued to produce. And so at the end of the day, it's one of those things about week one, right? The Packers didn't know the Eagles were going to come out and just shoot gaps with their linebackers against the run in the first quarter. It took them a quarter to adjust to it. Unfortunately, it was during that quarter when the Packers were getting the turnovers. They were in the red zone in goal-to-go situations, but had to settle for field goals because they couldn't get the running game going in those moments. So it's just part of how these games play out, and you just never know. The fact that the Packers still put 29 points on the board in this game, when you look at how many points they sort of left on the board with the red zone failures and the one extra point where they tried to go for two, didn't get it. You had a missed field goal in there. The Packers put 29 on the board and had, legitimate opportunity for 40, or at least upper 30s in this game. So there is something for the Packers to take into this game with Malik Willis at quarterback, and then potentially, you throw in the wrinkle of a guy like Willis who might have some runs designed for him as a quarterback, right? The kind of thing that you don't necessarily design for Jordan Love, but Malik Willis is a different type of quarterback. So I'll be curious to see exactly, when we talk about the game plan and what Malik Willis has to digest, what exactly the game plan is going to look like come Sunday afternoon.
It was funny because, Matt had said, he came out and said right away, if Jordan is not cleared, then it will be Malik Willis, with Sean Clifford, the 5th-round pick from last year, is currently on the practice squad. He would serve as the backup. And some people had asked in Insider Inbox that, well, why would you start Clifford? He has more knowledge of the playbook. That's true, but there's also a ton of film out there in preseason on Sean. People really don't know what to expect of what the Green Bay Packers want to do with Willis, in contrast to what he was doing and some of the things he was asked to do in Tennessee. Again, we did the 5 things story. We talked to him after he came here. This is a guy that is a dual threat quarterback. A lot of people said coming into the league, the more you can draw up for him based off of run action is going to be really benefit him, in addition to having a really good downfield arm towards the sideline. He can win. Malik Willis was one of the top quarterbacks in that 2022 draft for that reason. It's just now going to be a question of how quickly can you catch the train.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to have to find out potentially on Sunday exactly where he's at in this whole thing. But the Green Bay Packers went out, Mike, we said it. They didn't rest on their laurels. They felt they needed to get better at that position. And Malik Willis potentially could have a big opportunity to show that.
It definitely looks like a big opportunity for that young man. He did rush for, I believe it was right around 200 yards in the 3 starts that he had for Tennessee back as a rookie in 2020.
Yes,
so he did, he averaged, right around 60 or 70 rushing yards per game, which is pretty productive for a quarterback.
By the way, because I focus so much on Jacobs and Wilson, you had mentioned in your original toss to me with Jayden Reed, and I don't know if you're planning to get back to that, but I'm just going to jump in here and mention
Go ahead.
It again.
Yeah, go ahead.
The way that he made plays in this game, I said it to you, I said it to Tom Fanning. I haven't covered the league as long as you have. I haven't covered the league as long as Rob Domofsky has. in terms of a guy that is a natural wide receiver, I've never seen anybody play that position with the vision that he has. Whether it was on the 33-yard end around for the touchdown run, or whether it was the people he made miss on his 70-yard touchdown. When that guy is in open space, he's not as big as a running back, but he sure runs like one.
Yeah.
And his ability to break ankles, again, I don't want to get into the wide receiver 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 talk, but I thought this was an excellent example that when the pads are on and the bullets are flying, this kid is special.
Yeah. We saw a taste of that, right? I don't want to say tease because he certainly was very productive as a rookie. We saw the potential of what Jayden Reed could become in this league as a rookie last year. I think what we saw in the first game of his second season is that he is on the verge of sort of entering that definition of an electrifying player.
Yes.
There is something special, something different about the ball when it is in his hands, when the ball is headed towards him through the air. He brings a different dimension to things, and I do think that is something the Packers can, whether it's Jordan Love or Malik Willis at quarterback, I think that is something that the Packers are going to look to maximize on here moving forward in 2024.
The real tragedy in this was Jordan's knee injury happening one play after that 33-yard catch on the sideline by Reed. That pound for pound in terms of the difficulty, that might have been the most difficult catch anyone made on the field that day. And it came at a pivotal time for Green Bay, trying to mount and get themselves in a position for a Hail Mary. They got back to the line of scrimmage. Jordan gets hurt on the next play. Everybody forgets about it. It's not talked about. It's kind of lost within the box score. Jayden Reed just catch radius, in addition to just what he does when he gets the ball in the open field. Kid's got it, man.
Yeah.
There's a lot there for the Green Bay Packers to work with.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. We do need to discuss the defensive side of the ball here, and we'll do that after some sponsor business. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. Defensively for the Packers, it was not the debut of Jeff Hafley and his defense as the new defensive coordinator. It was not the debut that anybody was hoping for. 34 points by the Eagles. It started out tremendously with the Xavier McKinney interception, a great early moment for a brand new Green Bay Packer. Then the fumble recovery on the Eagles' second possession, and then Jair Alexander had an interception later in the game for the 3 takeaways. Now, the Eagles are a talented offense. You know, this is a team that's been to the Super Bowl. They're a perennial playoff contender. Jalen Hurts is a really, really difficult quarterback to handle. That receiver combination, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and then you throw Saquon Barkley into the backfield. We talked about him all of last week. And that offensive line certainly didn't look like, without Jason Kelce at center, that it had even skipped a beat. That looked like a pretty darn good unit that gave the Packers some trouble. So all that being said, getting a few days away from the game and trying to digest it, and yes, the missed tackles were frustrating to watch. I know the field conditions had something to do with that, and that cut both ways, et cetera, et cetera. Getting away from the game a little bit, the 2 things that bothered me the most about the defensive performance were the big touchdown to A.J. Brown coming out of the gate at halftime. I believe it was the second or third play of the second half. The Packers had done a decent job of keeping the explosive plays, at least in check a little bit during the first half. But then, boom, they hit you for that big one. It goes all the way for a touchdown, sort of answered the 70-yarder that Jayden Reed had in the second quarter for Green Bay. And then the other one for me was the final drive. The Packers, they bogged down on offense. There's, still 8 minutes left on the clock, basically, and Matt LaFleur in close decides, okay, not going to go for it on 4th down here. Kick the field goal to get within 2 points because you're only down 5. Get within 2. There's 8 minutes on the clock. You should have a chance to get the ball back. And the Packers defense couldn't get off the field. The Eagles killed 7 minutes and 25 seconds out of 7 minutes and 52 seconds in the fourth quarter, ran that clock all the way down, kicked the field goal to go back up by 5, and the Packers did, just had those few seconds left. Those were the two things that I think were the most troublesome, were the one long touchdown that was allowed, and then that final drive when Green Bay couldn't get off the field. Those are you limit explosives and you don't let a team control the football for 15, 16 plays, right? Those are the kinds of things that get you beat defensively in a very offensive league. So I think that becomes the focus moving forward, because I think that, the tackling is going to get better. It was week 1, guys haven't necessarily played. All these things factor into week 1 matchups. But so that's an area that I think will just get better for the Packers the more they play.
Agree with you 100%. Two things really quickly I want to go over. First off, because people always like doing this little funny thing about, this is why you play starters in the preseason. I think I heard something during the Monday night broadcast. I don't remember the exact total. The amount of illegal procedure penalties called league-wide this week 1 was like up there in terms of the totality of league history. I think there was like 12 or something, 24 or something like that.
Well, and they decided to make, this emphasis about the alignment of the offensive line and making sure guys are not too far off the ball and all that. So they just started chucking flags like crazy, which of course it would have been nice if they had been doing that in the preseason as opposed to waiting until week 1. But I digress.
Could they do a thing where it's like all the offensive linemen have to check with the side judge?
Yeah.
So it's like you have the receiver outside, you also have everybody else making sure we're all on alignment.
Make sure we're okay. Yeah.
Here's where you brought up the thing that bothered you the most. For me, it's the fact that the Eagles did not convert a third down in the second half. They did not convert when they were 0 for 5 in the second half. They were 4 of 13 in the game.
Yeah.
The Packers struggled to get them in third down situations was the issue. When they did, they got off the field. Or you had a weird defensive holding penalties that got called.
Yeah, I was going to say the one third down that was a conversion that doesn't statistically go as a conversion is the defensive hold on Kenny Clark, which was on 3rd and 7. Yep. It was going to be, I think, 4th and 1 off of a Hurts running play or scramble. But instead of even the 4th and 1 and the chance to maybe get the stop there, it was an automatic first down for a defensive hold on the interior of the defensive line.
And then he also had the defensive holding on Jair Alexander for his mime work in front. Yeah. Was that AJ Brown?
Which took away what was going to be a 3rd and 12 right at the start of that was the very start of the drive. The Packers were going to have the Eagles in 3rd and 12. But then Alexander got flagged for maybe one of the most phantom defensive holding calls I've ever seen. But again,
all that aside,
I digress.
Yeah, but all that aside, because that was the frustrating part of it. But here's why the Green Bay Packers lost the game. They didn't lose because of that. They didn't lose because of Kenny's thing. They lost because between the explosive plays and the ability for the Eagles to sustain drives, the Eagles ran the clock out on them, basically. And when they had the football, they just were a bit more efficient. Green Bay really struggled in the goal-to-go situations and the red zone opportunities and just weren't able to convert. Whereas when you get a 67-yard touchdown like he did with A.J. Brown to start the second half, the Packers went into halftime ahead. I believe they might even went into the fourth quarter ahead, too, if my memory serves me correctly. At least it was close. And it just was that the Eagles kept applying the pressure. And if you could just find a way, you don't have to go get an interception or a fumble recovery on every single series.
Right.
But after those 2 takeaways, that's when Jalen Hurts found his rhythm. He started finding Smith. He started finding Brown. And Saquon Barkley, Mike, like I say, every freaking time the Packers play Saquon Barkley, they bottle him up early, and then he breaks those 2 or 3 carries that, 1, make his stats look a lot more impressive than they probably were, and 2, really translate in the box score in terms of the wins and the losses and the touchdowns. He, again, was efficient when his team needed him to be efficient, just like last December when we were in East Rutherford. So for Green Bay, it's about trying to figure out what exactly the answers are going to be to this. Xavier McKinney came to the podium after the game. He felt like a lot of the things the Packers did incorrectly are correctable. I think there's still a lot of optimism, still a lot of hype, still a lot of energy about this defense and what's going to happen under Jeff Hafley. But what they have to find that balance with is you can get a lot of takeaways. The 2011 defense led the league in takeaways. They also were 32nd in total yards allowed.
Yeah.
You have to be able to strike the balance there. And Green Bay, I thought the front played well at times. It sounds like from the pass rushing perspective, the guys executed the assignment. They wanted to contain Jalen Hurts. They largely did that.
13 carries for 33 yards. That's, again, another one of, like you were talking about earlier. You look at a stat at the end of the game. If you had told me before kickoff Jalen Hurts was going to have 33 yards rushing on 13 attempts, considering what Jalen Hurts did to the Packers 2 years ago in Philadelphia with his legs, it would have been like, that's great. Then the defense is doing the job there, right? There's always a push and pull. There's a give and take. You try to take something away, and it's then what does the opponent do to try to compensate for that? It was the combination of the explosive plays and then the one long sustained drive at the end when the Packers are desperately wanting to get the ball back. You're only down by 2, get it back, get another field goal, and you take the lead, you have a chance to win, and it just never materialized.
If you watch, like the end of the 49ers game, I mean, that's basically what the 49ers did too. When you get a lead like that, you can start pounding it down another team's throat. You gas out their defense, you kind of take the air out of the balloon a little bit, and you're able to get out of there with a victory. The part that I think that's funny though, Mike, you and I, we can cover this league for so long, and as much as coaches don't want to give away game plans, they don't want to talk about what's going to happen. How many times is it where you go back and look and see what happened the last time between two teams in the adjustments that those teams make, right? Whether it was the way the Packers defended Hurts, or as Keyshawn Nixon talked about last time, he absolutely killed them in that game in 2022 in the kickoff returns. I think he averaged like 31 yards a return or something, 152 yards total. And in this game, they weren't messing with it. Every single time, man is booting it through the end zone. It's those type of things. Now, talking quickly about some silver linings here to come out of this, I thought Edgerrin Cooper got 11 snaps. He had 3 tackles and a pass deflection. When you're talking about guys maximizing their minutes there, Matt LaFleur even said on Monday he's probably warranting more opportunities here moving forward.
Every time we see Edgerrin Cooper on the field, whether it was on the practice field during training camp, and which unfortunately we didn't get to see him as much as we wanted, also then seeing him in this opening game against the Eagles, anytime we see Edgerrin Cooper on the field, his speed jumps off the field. Like, it's undeniable how fast he is and how much faster he is than the average defensive player, at least defensive front seven player in this league.
And it's pivotal to the inside linebacker position because you could talk about guys that have 4.4 speed. I mean, he had 4.51. Quay is 4.52. There's guys like we talked about before the game, TJ Edwards, he ran in the 4.8s, goes undrafted, but he doesn't waste any movement and can play the game at a faster level based on how he's reading things. The benefit of that speed, especially for a young player, is it's going to allow you to maybe make some mistakes, but allow your athleticism to compensate for that. Matt LaFleur said it wasn't perfect. There's some communication stuff that Cooper has to work out. You have to be able to get those reps. You have to be able to be thrown in the fire a little bit, but when the Packers are looking for an improving defense throughout the course of the season. I'm not playing depth chart here, but I'm just telling you, there's a reason why they drafted him and Teron Hopper. I mean, these are the guys that were day 2 picks.
Yeah.
They see as fundamental guys that you can build with in the future, and giving him some opportunities, I think, is going to be really pivotal here moving forward.
Yeah. When I look at the big picture on the defensive side for the Packers, I'm me, Wes, I feel like the game is oriented toward offense. When you see these phantom defensive holding calls on Jair Alexander and some random, like once out of 60 plays, a defensive holding call on a defensive lineman on a 3rd and 7. I mean, it's just, there's so much in this game that is geared against defenses that we talk a lot about complementary football. And that's how you win games in this league. And to me, complementary football in this league is when your defense is able to do something positive, the offense has to capitalize on it to maintain control of the game. And when you look at how this game unfolded, the defense got the 2 turnovers early, but the offense was only able to put 6 points on the board. In the second half, the defense got back-to-back 3-and-outs. Back-to-back 3-and-outs after the Eagles had established quite a bit in the second quarter offensively and put some points on the board. The defense gets back-to-back 3-and-outs, but then the Packers offense goes punt interception on those 2 following possessions. That's not complementary football, and that's not how to win games in this league. You have to be able to capitalize when your defense does good things, because there are going to be bad things that happen to your defense all the time in this league. That's how it's generated. That's how it's oriented. It's about offense. It's about scoring points. And the Packers weren't able to capitalize on the good things that their defense.
Yeah, I mean, for Xavier McKinney to come out in the second play as an official member of the Green Bay Packers in a regular season game and have that interception, Jair Alexander gets the one late as well, and Green Bay just isn't able to get those footballs in the end zone, and it's tough, man. We again, that's ultimately, you go back to 2020 in the NFC Championship game, that's how they lost that game. They got some takeaways. They weren't able to create enough points in the second half with them. You have to be able to finish those opportunities, especially early on when you're getting it inside the scoring territory of the other team. Now, again, I think you want to look at silver linings, the fact that Green Bay got out of this thing defensively healthy. We were able to now face a team, and Anthony Richardson coming in, that challenge that's going to present, and a very similar type of quarterback, and he's going to do things unorthodox. He completed, we'll talk about this later this week, he completed 9 passes for 200 yards. He is an exploding play waiting to happen.
Yeah.
But isn't your traditional quarterback. It's not going to get easier, is my point. Green Bay's defense is going to have a gut check here. It's going to have to look in the mirror, and it's going to have to make sure they say to themselves, okay, we did some really good things in the preseason. We did some really good things during training camp. How do we make those things happen on Sundays other than just getting some takeaways early?
Yeah. Well, I know we're running a little bit long. I just want to get a couple of thoughts from you on other things around the league in week 1, particularly in the NFC North. The Lions and the Vikings and the Bears all chalked up victories in very different ways. Hats off to the Vikings. Sam Darnold, Aaron Jones making their debut in those purple helmets. Those guys got it done. The Vikings defense got it done against a Giants team that is definitely searching for answers. The Lions, they blow the lead on Sunday Night Football to the Rams, and the Rams actually have a chance to put that game away. They have a first down with 2.5 minutes to go. And but the Lions get the stop, they get the tying field goal, then they just ran the ball down the Rams' throats in overtime. So Matthew Stafford didn't, basically from the 2.5 minute mark where Stafford has a first down for the Rams and a chance to put the game away, basically Stafford didn't get the ball back. The Lions drove and kicked the field goal to tie, and then in the one possession in overtime. And then the Bears, their defense and special teams overcame a very shaky debut from Caleb Williams at quarterback. So everybody else in the NFC North is 1-0, and the Packers are 0-1 looking up.
Just want to see that Tennessee Titans team, that same Tennessee Titans team in 2 weeks. I mean, what they did and the ways in which they hurt themselves, whether it was the blocked punt or just the offensive, just atrocity in the.
It was Christmas in September in Chicago, man. Holy cow! That was a total giveaway of a football game beyond normal comprehension.
It is one thing if you would be doing that in the first half and you fall behind. You guys had a 3-score lead, and that's how you let it leak away, by just quickly giving them Christmas present after Christmas present.
It was unbelievable.
And the Bears get out of there with the win. I'll bring it back really quick to the Vikings because I've been very critical of them. I had some huge questions, especially after McCarthy's injury. Sam Darnold, I've gone so many different ways on Sam Darnold, Mike. I mean, he did put together some good football last year for the 49ers. I mean, he stepped up.
Yeah, he did.
Need him to do. I thought that was a questionable signing for them to give him $10 million and to have him go to Minnesota as, the starter holding, the seat warm. And then he did exactly 19 of 24, did exactly what he needed to do to help the Vikings win that game. The Lions quickly, 163 rushing yards, Mike. And
most of those on one drive in overtime, quite frankly.
Fed David Montgomery when they have the backs and they got the offensive linemen, and as some people were joking about on Twitter when they've kind of forgot about that for a little bit, they showed that when they need to, they can just run the ball down your throat.
Yeah, I'll make a couple other comments and then we'll get out of here. With regard to the Vikings, we saw last year when Kirk Cousins went down and the Vikings were putting these other quarterbacks in there. We saw Josh Dobbs, right? We saw Kevin O'Connell come up with these game plans, and Josh Dobbs was able to win some games and keep the Vikings in contention, but it was always short-lived, right? Then as soon as there's enough out there, then teams figure out, okay, this is what Kevin O'Connell and this offensive system is doing with this quarterback, and then defenses are able to start to buckle down, they make life more difficult, and ultimately, the Vikings faded in the end. what will happen now with Sam Darnold, because this was another new guy. Kevin O'Connell was able to strut his stuff, and I'm not being critical of O'Connell here in terms of how the Vikings
He's a good coach.
did last year. I'm being complimentary that he takes these quarterbacks that nobody expects him to be able to win with. He puts together these game plans and gets those guys executing to a level where they can win. It just hasn't proven to be sustainable when you don't have that franchise quarterback guy, right? Yeah. So I'm very curious to see what happens with the Vikings in that regard moving forward. The other thing I want to say is coming out of week one, and I know mostly my brain is always focused on the NFC. I don't look at the AFC all that much as the regular season goes on, but I was most impressed by 3 teams in the NFC, one being the Eagles. They really did impress me, as frustrating as it was to see the Packers not be able to pull out that game. I do think the Eagles are going to be darn good. But the other 2 teams that impressed me were the Cowboys and the 49ers. I thought both of those, especially the Cowboys being on the road in week 1 at Cleveland, a team that was the best defense in the league last year statistically in several categories. And the Cowboys really took it to them and kind of got a runaway blowout victory in week 1 right after Dak Prescott signs the big new contract and all that. So things are looking up down there in Dallas, at least the way the season is starting.
And you tip your cap to Kyle Shanahan, you tip your cap to the 49ers to not have, I don't care if they didn't know if he wasn't playing on Friday or 10 minutes before the game, to not have Christian McCaffrey.
Yep.
To put Jared Mason out there, who's a guy they've been developing, but to put him out there, he gets more carries in that game than he's ever had since high school. Guy played at Georgia Tech and he didn't have that many carries.
Right.
And to be able to perform the way he did, finish with 147 rushing yards, helped me win my fantasy game, I was saying. But the fact that they were able to run as dominant and play as dominantly as they did against that the Jets defense, I think speaks volumes about those coaches.
I've talked a lot over the last couple of years when we talk about the 49ers, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey is as good, as dangerous, as explosive an offensive trio as there is in this league. But anytime one of those guys has been out, a lot of times it's been Deebo, but there are times that McCaffrey has missed games as well in his time in San Francisco. It doesn't seem like San Francisco's offense is the same. Last night was the first time, Monday night against the Jets, the first time that it felt to me the 49ers were missing one of those big 3 on offense, and you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell. And that was, in my mind, what was so impressive about that performance.
And they didn't even try to start passing with Mason either. They just said, run the football, kid. Go do the best you can.
That kid ran hard.
He ran hard. Hard. It was a fun game to watch in terms of that. And maybe not the most entertaining ever, but just watching a guy that is an former undrafted free agent. Now he's playing for a team that was in the Super Bowl last year. And they just say, we don't have the reigning NFL Offensive Player of the Year. You're going to be the one carrying the football for us.
Yeah, here you go.
It's pretty impressive.
Here you go. All right, well, we've gone long today, but it's been a fun show. Thanks for putting up with us. Please continue to follow all of our coverage of the Packers on Packers.com. Week 2, we'll have another show this week. We'll look ahead to the Indianapolis Colts and that matchup, and maybe we'll hear from one or both of the Packers quarterbacks by the time next time we turn the cameras on. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.